on Wikipedia they said that Jaime Hernandez was the Paul McCartney of the John Lennon-Paul McCartney relationship that he has with his brother, which I felt was really weird. I don't feel these stories to be, I think that he's certainly, I interpret as, I interpret them as, they're not completely forthright. I mean, they're in the Archie comic style or something, and they're about, they, in some ways, they certainly are putting emotions into aestheticized women with gigantic boobs, some of them, like Penny Century here. But there's a point, especially with the character of Maggie, to make her more, she gets fatter, and there's attention paid to her butt getting bigger and her being embarrassed by getting fatter. And I think that is kind of, basically he's taking these idealized female relationships and making them more down to earth in their portrayal, and that doesn't make me think of the worst of Paul McCartney, which is that when Paul McCartney is at his worst, like post Beatles, his things are so hermetic that they have no relation to any actual emotion. They're nice pop things, but you can tell that the emotion isn't really felt. But here, at least in these early comics, the emotion is truly felt, and I think really great. And although I've read Palomar and Gilbert Hernandez, and actually I haven't read all of it. I haven't even I skipped over one of the wrestler stories in this, but I haven't really read all of Palomar at all. I've missed a lot of Palomar, or Palomar. But the idealization of young lesbian teenagers makes me think, especially by a male writer as he got older. But once again, he made a point to age and change his characters. But it makes me think of The Cocoon. It makes me think of a lonely comics book guy. It's not a livable way of dealing with life. But here we have Maggie is in a mansion in a short called 100 Rooms, and she hooks up with this guy who's a bum, or a homeless man, I guess I should not say bum, who lives in this mansion, who's sneaking this mansion. She hides with him in a room and sleeps with him, and feels guilty for not contacting Hopi, her lover, or her friend. And basically, there's these two panels which I think are really interesting. She looks at the guy and says, she says, I mean, look at him, he's a bum, he hasn't bathed or changed his clothes in 10 years. He's missing teeth. And then she says, it's okay, I'm missing teeth too, and kisses him. And to me, that's like the epitome of what the relationship with Hopi is portraying on some level. Just casually in bed, no real difference between, well, it just seems like for men, their idea of that relationship is utterly relaxed, and there's none of the difference between lovers that is in a relationship where one between objectification, and also between, I don't know, I'm making a fool of myself here, but what I'm trying to say is just that this thing where she says she's missing teeth too is kind of, I think, pretty much Hernandez's idea of how a relationship could be without the distance that someone might feel between men and women. Once again, I'm really projecting as him into a comic, but and there's a book he has called Fear of Comics, which is just a random collection, and in that there's a picture, and I may be confusing him with his brother, but there's a picture of him completely naked and just smiling creepily at the viewer, and it's drawn very realistically. And I always took that to mean that it was the same way that Daniel Clowes inserted him into Ghost World, and Enid Coleslaw, whose name is an anagram of Daniel Clowes' name, is totally, she considers him an old perv, and he said in interviews that he wanted to make the point that he has nothing to do with these characters' world. And and Ghost World is a similar type of story. He said he based Ghost World on some girls he knew from college, but you know, I think it's pretty clear that Ghost World is basically a shadow tale about. To me, I imagine that Daniel Clowes, though this is probably an era, but that his closest relationships were with men, and women were an idealized, aestheticized, far away thing, that objectified. That, and basically he drew a story about people he didn't know, or a world that he couldn't be a part of, and then he showed how that world was like his own, how his closest relationships are with men, but then in Ghost World, their fear of losing their relationship causes them to self-destruct it, and at some levels it's read as their fear of intimacy with each other, whether it's sexual or not. But anyway, in this comic we switch back to Hopi, and once again another character, Izzy, is telling her that she's obviously in love with Maggie, and shouldn't she admit that or whatever, and Hopi just kind of brushes it off. And once again, this is just, here it's more like denial or something, but later it just is a conscious choice. I don't know, in some ways it's really, really smart to have a character, like, at least she's not constantly helpless in throes of Maggie, because then later this guy who tells a story of a date with Hopi, and what's interesting about him is he's presented, I think he's a Caucasian character who just kind of is from another world and comes and visits and hangs out at their apartment and stuff like that, and we see that he's basically he's part of their world, and he's so happy to be part of their world, and then he gets kicked out of it, and he misses them, and his mistake is to fall in love with Hopi, and which we know is ridiculous, but we also know that his situation is analogous to Hopi's relationship with Maggie. They're friends, and then basically what happens when he falls in love is he's edited out of their existence and never sees her again. So this would explain Hopi's non-involvement with Maggie, how she keeps her distance. And it's really interesting how we never quite clearly see how tortured she would be about it. We see this guy who lonely narrates that he never saw them again, or maybe once saw her but couldn't go up and talk to her. And it's very fitting. Once again, I've done a pretty horrible job with this review, but I'll either edit it down or redo it or something, but and it's pretty clearly just projection and stuff that I'm not sure has any real business with the novel. But I just wanted to say that basically I think it's an interesting way in which Hernandez takes, this kind of, I think, like an idealized hermetic world, and then opens it up, and then it just kind of I don't know, those are the things that I saw in it, and yeah, I don't know, I'll shut up now.